Welcome to Capital Outsider, a show about people and ideas outside the halls of power, exploring alternatives to conventional political wisdom.
Welcome to Capital Outsider. I'm your host, Eric Sundwall. We kind of have a special show. Joining me is Bill McMillen, Jeff Russell, and John Mounteer. We've each been on the show. This is our 10th show, and probably our final one of 2007. And we're going to indulge a little bit here, and we're going to get free and talk a little bit about presidential politics. We're coming to the end of December, and we have a huge fluidity on both sides of the aisle, if you will. And of course, being all libertarians, it's hard for us to do anything but watch in this scenario. But we've got a Ron Paul surge. We've got Mike Huckabee is suddenly looming on the horizon. What's going on? What's going to happen? Let's have some predictions. Bill?
Well, one of my predictions is that Hillary is unstoppable as far as the Democrats are concerned, and that's a travesty.
She's getting a little slide this week, though, right? She's making fun of Obama. Edwards is going to be really strong in Iowa.
But I think she's got the structure, the organization that's going to enable her to prevail. And I also think that she's got a number of people in the campaign that are going to pull out all the stops in order to make sure that she gets the nomination. She's an insider for sure.
Are we going to be okay if Hillary leaves New York to run?
Well, I wish she just resigned from the Senate, because I was the Senate candidate in 88 and 98, and I wouldn't mind being the Senate candidate in 08 if that was the case. I have an 8-point program if I have a chance to run for Senate. But on the Republican side, I think it's very hard to predict. I did notice that in the news that I saw this morning that Mike Huckabee has sort of criticized President Bush, and he's criticized him on the basis of his foreign policy. And I think it's Mike Huckabee's attempt to try to wean away some of the Ron Paul support that is in the Republican Party and in the independent voters.
John or Jeff, what's up with Mike Huckabee? This guy's basically come from nowhere.
Well, he may only play in Iowa. I mean, it seems like what I'm hearing I listen to NPR a lot, and what I'm hearing is that it's mostly religious fundamentalists. He's playing up his religious background, and that's where his support's coming from. The other thing is Iowa is not, may not really be a good bellwether of anything. When I was listening today, they were talking about it's only about 6% of the voters
it's a
in
small
Iowa
amount of delegates
actually go to the caucuses, because it's a pain in the neck. Apparently, it takes a couple hours.
But isn't the average thing in the media is that somebody gains the momentum or the edge in Iowa, they transfer it to New Hampshire, they go through South Carolina. If you look at the first group of primaries, you're looking at about a total of 174 delegates. When we get to February 5th, you're looking at over 2,000. Is Rudy going to take Florida, Jeff?
Well, you had asked for predictions before, and for a long time I've been predicting that the major parties will have a New York election from the major parties, with Hillary and Clinton and Giuliani being the nominees of both those parties.
And we've even got the possibility or the potential of a Mike Bloomberg jumping in as an independent, too.
Well, that's true. I hadn't thought of that.
So it would really be a lot of New Yorkers there. Now, let me ask Jeff. Jeff's the chairman of the New York State Libertarian Party, and in full disclosure, I'm also a member of the Libertarian National Committee, and just this last, on December 8th or 9th, the Libertarian National Committee decided to invite Ron Paul into should he fail after
correct,
February 5th.
Yes.
What kind of a fallout are you seeing from average libertarians from that? Is this a positive thing? What's your take on this particular situation?
Well, some people might not realize this, but Ron Paul is actually a member of the Libertarian Party and has been for many years. Even though he's now serving in Congress as a Republican, he has still maintained his membership in the Libertarian Party and is still a member in good standing in the Libertarian Party. And you're correct that at the last meeting of the Libertarian National Committee, they introduced a resolution asking him to consider seeking the Libertarian nomination, since he is a member of the party and is in good standing, and since he is getting so much publicity. They viewed it as candidate recruitment. Other people have viewed it as trying to tamper with the Republican primaries. So I guess it depends on your take.
You bring that up in the national committees, and we're seeing a situation right now where the Democratic National Committee has basically told Michigan and Florida, no way, you guys can't have your delegates. You've pushed this up too close. You violated the rules. Do you think there's going to be any effect there? We also have changes with how the delegates are selected in California. I guess really what I'm trying to do is get into the idea of we have a really fluid situation here, and how do you think where does that go? How do these things play?
I think it's window dressing.
Go ahead, John.
I think it's probably decided. I mean, I agree that I think Hillary still has got the nomination pretty well locked up, unless something really crazy happens. On the Republican side, I think it is a little tougher to see what's going to happen. Giuliani has obviously the support in New York State of the establishment, and whether Romney could unseat him, I don't know. I mean, one of the things, why do people vote? A lot of different reasons. One is Romney looks good on screen, but it's also who do people think can win? I don't know. A
lot of the coverage when we talk about Ron Paul, and he's just recently done this money bomb, and he's raised an incredible amount of money on the internet.
$6 million yesterday?
It was $6 million on December 16th. And what happens is that this doesn't translate into the polls necessarily. And that's one of the big unknowns going into this. We have a shifting dynamic with younger people who don't have landlines. Is the polling, how we survey and how we do polls, is that going to affect, John Kerry was running 4% in October of 2003 and took Iowa, and then just kind of snowballed after that.
I read an explanation from Zogby, the guy out in Utica who does a lot of polling, because the arguments came up the last big election about how accurate and how valid are telephone polls anymore, as people are moving more to cell phones and getting rid of their landlines, using caller ID so they don't answer the phone. But at least up until the last election, the telephone polls still were an accurate reflection of the results, largely a result. And he doesn't say that it's going to stay that way. And I question when's the tipping point going to be. Personally, I use caller ID all the time, and not that I block any of you guys' calls, but
I use it too.
I don't answer the phone unless I know who's calling, pretty much.
And we have a situation.
And I think most people.
There's a lot of critical issues coming into play here. What effect do you think that the war is going to have on all of this? Bill, I know you have a lot of strong feelings about this.
Well, I think that over the past 4 or 5 months, the war has fallen into the background as far as an issue of great importance to a number of people. I'm not sure whether that's being manipulated.
We're worried about Mexicans making a living more so than we are Americans
immigration
dying.
And health care have become two issues that have been pushed, I think, and the differences between the candidates on these issues have been put into the limelight, I think, as a way to take our attention away from the seriousness of our involvement in world affairs and the world and the foreign policy that we have. Whether I don't necessarily think this is a conspiracy that people have gotten together, but to try to downplay this issue. But I think many of the candidates are beginning to think that when it comes to the final count of votes, any little word that they say that might be misinterpreted with regard to the issue of war and security might be misinterpreted and used against them. And so even though they may have strong feelings about it, they're going to try to downplay it. It's one of the serious things about the political debates that take place is that the candidates start trying to appeal to the voters with scripted language instead of what they really feel about issues.
Although Ron Paul has been pretty much right. It's a broken record.
Ron Paul's been consistent.
Full disclosure, I did register as a Republican so I could vote in the
You registered
primary.
to vote, you enrolled as a Republican.
Enrolled, I'm sorry. I enrolled as a Republican so I could vote in the primary in February for Ron Paul.
Yeah, I was going to say, you had asked about the polls before, Eric, and I got a mailing about a month ago from the, or maybe 2 months ago or so, from the Republican National Committee. And in it they asked me which candidate was I supporting for president. And they listed a whole bunch of candidates, about 10 candidates. And I was going down the list of candidates and looking at who was in the debates and who was on their list. And I saw that every single candidate who was in the debates on TV was on the list except for one. And guess who that one candidate missing was? Ron Paul. He was the only one. And they even had candidates listed who haven't announced that they're running for president. That they had Newt Gingrich listed on there.
Well, we see that on the Democratic side, too. The two most primary anti-war candidates, Dennis Kucinich and Mike Gravel, have been marginalized. Mike Gravel was very important when it came to the Pentagon Papers in the early 70s, and he served as a distinguished senator in the United States Senate. And here he is being marginalized just by virtue of the fact that maybe he got a little crazy with his credit cards or something along those lines. And it brings, we should maybe take the opportunity, because there's so much yapping that goes on in regards to the mainstream media. You never see Tim Russer or Chris Matthews give a minute to a third-party candidate. Now, hopefully we're going to have George Phillies on at the beginning part of next year, who's a libertarian candidate for president. Let's discuss some real nuts and bolts of third-party candidacies in 2008. And, to your knowledge, John, what's your take on the libertarians? And maybe we'll go with Jeff to the Greens. Cynthia McKinney's talking about running.
I'm afraid the candidates that I've seen, that I'm aware of, libertarian candidates that I'm aware of, I don't see anybody having a chance of doing anything significant.
Other than winning is going to be.
We got Ron Paul.
That's right. Yeah.
If Ron Paul.
Winning's going to be winning is incredibly problematic for any third party. But
I'm not talking about winning. I'm talking about even making a significant, even being visible. There's nobody with money. There's a few, one or two people that are presentable but have not a clue of the ideas or the libertarian politics. So, we just don't have anybody. I mean, George Phillies, I think, is great with ideas. I don't think he's going to sell, and he doesn't have any money. So,
but when people vote third party, what they're really saying is that we have no confidence, we have no desire to support the main party candidates. And when they look to the Libertarians and the Greens, presumably the two biggest parties in the country besides Republicans and Democrats, is there an expectation that it doesn't even matter if they run Donald Duck for their candidate? Will they just vote that way? Or do you have any sense between family or friends or voters whether or not they have any inclination towards voting for a third party?
I think there's an inclination to vote for a third party, that if they're dissatisfied, and I think they are dissatisfied with what the Republicans and the Democrats have offered, usually they end up, individual voters will end up deciding upon who their favorite candidate is of the two major parties, because they start emphasizing who it is they have a chance, that might have a chance to win. What I think the opportunity of the Libertarian Party is to provide an outlet for those people who are really committed to an alternative philosophy. Outside of that, I think we need a personality and we need a fundraiser, and to that extent, I think we've got some potential. If Ron Paul were to be the candidate, that he's going to have a war chest for sure beyond February. If he wants to turn it to a third-party run for the presidency, and he's got a following. And I think that there's an opportunity there that in a three-way race, a number of people will turn to the Libertarians as a viable alternative, more so than they have in the past.
Yeah, Ron Paul supporters will follow him. I mean, we did our own little local non-scientific poll, and there's been national polls. I mean, and people aren't. The people, the Ron Paul followers, are not interested in party. They could give a rip about the parties. Mm-hmm. In fact, most of them are.
They're
but
interested
isn't it that the hope or the idea that he's a Republican and could possibly be elected, isn't that kind of the impetus between a lot of the Ron Paul support? If there was a Ron Paul-like person or somebody in the Libertarian Party, would you see this attraction toward just the candidate? You say it's not the parties, but and Jeff and Bill and we all can
Well,
attest to the difficulty of getting on the ballot, getting into debates, and that's what Ron Paul's saying.
He's cleared that hurdle, though, because he's already gotten out there as a Republican candidate. So, I mean, just the reality of this election is that he's already been out there. He's got a following. They're people from every party, and a lot of people who never registered in any party. A lot of people never voted before.
He probably sacrifices his House seat, though, if he does something like that, right? I mean, so it's the case sera for Ron Paul at this point.
Don't know. I mean, how old is he?
He's 72 years old. He's
Does he
72
care?
years old. I don't know.
Don't know.
In a Democratic sweep, he's in a sense sacrificing his House seat anyway. Just being in the House is a sacrifice, as many Republicans have declared by deciding that they're not going to run. But I think that conceivably, if the prediction is correct that it's going to be Hillary Clinton and Rudy Giuliani, I think that a third-party candidate conceivably could do very well throughout the whole West and South.
No, when you say do well in media, do well in actually getting the vote, do well in getting on the ballot, all of the above. I mean, is there really a potential? Are Rudy and Hillary that polarizing that people will jump in order to go towards
it has to be a third-party candidate who really distinguishes himself from them, though. And I do think the war will be the distinguishing issue.
Ron Paul would make that the distinguishing issue because basically Hillary is a pro-war candidate.
Right.
She has supported the war.
Right.
She continues to support the whole concept of our foreign policy intervention.
Right. She doesn't want
is
to be
not an
portrayed
alternative.
as soft on defense.
Right.
But isn't the idea that she's going to, well, the adults are back in office now. We've got Richard Holbrooke in the wings, and we've got Bubba in the wings, and Madeleine Albright probably needs something to do at this point. And they're going to come in and just, we're going to get a logical, strategic withdrawal, and maybe we'll still be there in 2012, but everything's going to look so much better because we're going to handle it better than George Bush did, right? Isn't that the spin, if you will, or the behind? That's the cocktail party talk, right? That's what they're saying.
It's hard to imagine anybody doing worse than Bush.
It is hard to imagine.
I don't know.
We thought that 8 years ago, that it was impossible for anybody to be worse than Bill Clinton. And many of us would like to have him back, not Hillary, but him back.
I would take Bill any day.
Well, we kind of get 2-for-1 again if Hillary gets elected, right? We have a couple firsts here in this election. We have the possibility of the first woman for president, the possibility of the first African American for president, and not much is spoken about Bill Richardson, whom I think is probably one of the most qualified Democrats in the entire field. He's a former governor, congressperson, UN ambassador, was secretary of the Energy Department. People vote their hearts, right? And isn't that what it boils down to?
And with regard to Bill Richardson, I think that he's one of the primary candidates, first tier, second tier, with a little bit of recognition, that has not spoken differently, as I can determine from what I've followed on him, a different message to different groups of voters,
which is something. Which is something,
right? and very, very quietly during the debate about immigration and the fallout from our governor's motor vehicle registration for immigrants. There's an argument to be made for that, and basically, he just very quietly said, we've been doing that in New Mexico for years and it works. He wasn't appealing to any particular group of prejudices that people had.
Arizona's going the other way. Did you hear that on the news?
Yes, but Bill Richardson, I think, does come across as somebody that is not going to speak to his audience. He's going to speak the truth and he's going to speak his feelings. And you agree with his feelings or you don't agree with his feelings. You agree with his positions, you don't agree. I think he is a person that is a straight arrow.
Now, we spend a lot of time beating up on Hillary in New York. Jeff ran against her in 2006 for Senate. What about a guy like John Edwards? Is he going to be able to get beyond the pettiness that we're seeing perhaps between the Clinton campaign and the Obama campaign? And where do you think John Edwards is going to fall into all of this, Jeff?
Is he going to get beyond and get into the issues?
Well, he kind of creates this, even though he's worth $52 million, he creates this whole scenario of this two Americas. We saw Mayor Cuomo do that in 1992 when he talked about the shining city on the hill and the other America. And that it resonates. You have factory workers out there stumping for John Edwards. And he's been in Iowa before, and he's created that base. He's got the little magician Joe Trippi in the background working for him. I think John Edwards is going to be one of the unknown factors in all of this.
Yeah. Well, I tend to think most people vote for the candidate who seems like a nice guy to them. I don't think people really think too much about the issues. I think they just kind of.
So do they think John Edwards is nice? He's got the $400 haircut, right?
I don't know, but really, I think that's what it comes down to. That people don't listen to the issues. That they just vote. This person seems sincere to me, and that's how they go about casting their vote.
As far as people listening to the issues, what I think they really need to do is listen to how a candidate presents the issues to different blocks of voters. And if you find a candidate that ends up talking to different blocks of voters in a different way, that's someone you can't trust.
Well,
and we know one person who's that candidate for sure.
Like when Hillary uses a southern drawl.
Can you do that in this day of YouTube? We saw the senator down in Virginia basically got beat by Webb because of the macaca comment, and the video camera being there. These guys are held accountable. Thank goodness there's a writer's strike going on in Hollywood right now, because Jon Stewart and Letterman and Leno would be just having a blast with this. This is one of the tragedies of the entire campaign to date right now, is that these guys are kind of on the bench right now, right?
Yeah, I hear you.
Colbert would be brilliant with this stuff, right?
They did a funny, it wasn't intentionally funny. They we're talking about the different messages to different groups today. Again, on NPR. This is not a plug for NPR, but I do listen to it a lot. And they had a clip of Barack Obama commercial playing in, and I can't remember the two locations, but one was to the Spanish, his Spanish audience or Latino audience, and it was emphasizing how his father came from someplace. I'm not sure where his father is. So his father's an immigrant from someplace. But then another commercial playing in South Carolina, where he emphasized how his father left when he was 2, and his mother had to raise him as a single mother. So that was kind of a funny dichotomy there.
Well, we're getting close to the end of the show here, and I'd like to take the opportunity to thank each and every one of you, and especially Mike Lynch, who you don't see on camera. Mike is our director. He runs the board. He kind of keeps us in line here. We've had a lot of fun in regard to creating this show. What are we going to see from Capital Outsider in 2008? Do we have big plans coming up here?
Well, we have George Phillies coming in for the Libertarian Party, right? I think John Finan, another candidate for the Libertarian Party, was interested in coming in.
Well, have you talked to him? With his campaign?
Not in a while, but he is from New York City. And,
he was at the convention.
Right, he was at the convention, right, and he will be at the convention in April. Or at least he expressed an interest in being there at our state convention in April.
Have they sent out the notices for the state convention yet?
No, not yet.
Maybe we can do a live show from the state convention.
We could give something like that a shot. Real quick, let's get Bill's predictions for after February 5th. Republicans and Democrats will stay away from the third party because it's not nearly as popular. But let's go down the line here and get a quick 1-minute prediction from Bill, Jeff, and John, and then we'll wrap that up.
I think that it'll be Hillary and Mitt Romney, and that Ron Paul will accept the enthusiastic draft of the Libertarian National Committee.
Are we going to bring Ron Paul into Albany, Jeff? And is he going to be on our show? What's your prediction?
I don't know. I was going to say that's no fair, Bill. You just stole my prediction. Except for I was going to say Giuliani. I was going to say Hillary will emerge as the front runner. Giuliani as the front runner for the Republicans, and At that point, or soon after that point, Ron Paul will decide he doesn't have a chance of getting the Republican nomination and will start actively seeking the Libertarian nomination. I believe that takes place Memorial Day weekend, May of 2008. So from February to May, he'll have about 3 months to start actively seeking that nomination.
John, is it
Libertarian Party
The
nomination?
Libertarian
John,
Party
is
nomination.
it Unity 08? Is it going to be McCain and Lieberman?
No. I agree with these guys. My only question is on the Republican side. Romney or Giuliani seem to be the likely options, but not sure.
McCain, really, that was surprising news, I think, this week to get the endorsement of Lieberman, and I think that will have a significant impact. Certainly, I think it'll have a significant impact in New Hampshire.
Well, I'm just preparing everybody to get ready for Hillary. We've experienced her for the last 8 years here, and I'm preparing everybody else to get ready for a Hillary administration and the return of all our favorites. Yeah, I think I'm going to go on a limb and say that Ron Paul is not going to go for the Libertarian nomination. I think he's going to pull out. I don't think he wants his legacy to be one that is the Ralph Nader of the 2008 campaign. I think what he has done is elevated the condition of the war in Republicans. He's spoken the truth to these candidates that you're not going to see in the general pursuit. He's brought issues to the fore like monetary policy and things. You've got college students excited about the gold standard, and I know you guys have been around for a while as far as that's been concerned. So, even if Ron Paul doesn't win or doesn't go for it, in a way, he's really kind of won, and maybe he's laid the groundwork for some of the other things that we can do. Yeah. We're seeing a lot of enthusiastic support amongst the Ron Paul supporters. We'll probably we see a lot of mixing between the two, libertarians and the Ron Paul group. Maybe this will be some sort of, when we look 10 years down the road, that this was the beginning of the end for these two parties. That's where I'm going to go on that. Again, I just want to take the time to wish everybody a good holiday season out there. This is our 10th Capital Outsider show. You'll see more of us syndicated throughout the Capital District and New York State, and maybe we can look forward to another roundtable session sometime around February 5th when this all gets hot again. My name is Eric Sundwall. Joining me was Bill McMillen, Jeff Russell, John Mounteer. This has been Capital Outsider.